Guys, Jason back with you. Private Pilot 2.1, the airspeed indicator. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is our airspeed indicator is color-coded. And let's look at this one on the screen here real quick together. Notice there's a green arc, a white arc, a yellow arc, and a red area at the upper limit. These are called the color-coded markings of our airspeed indicator. And it's a reference for a pilot. No matter which aircraft you're flying, you can look and know these certain airspeeds. For example, let's look at that white arc. That white arc that goes from about 60 to 63-ish, where that arrow was just drawn, all the way around to 130. Now that white arc tells us a lot. That white arc is our flap operating range. I can dump in the flaps as long as my airspeed is within that white arc. Now that white arc also tells me two of my V-speeds. V-speeds are very important for us to remember and learn as well. I remember being a private pilot going, man, I gotta learn all these different speeds and they have these weird acronyms behind them. I'm gonna give you some easy ways to remember them. But let's start with the two V-speeds our white arc shows us. First, it shows us VFE, which is our maximum flap extension speed. Now, VFE is shown at the end, the higher limit of our white arc, that 130. VFE, every speed starts with a V, and the FE is flap extension. VFE is our maximum flap extension speed and is shown by the higher limit of the white arc. The other speed there is VSO. That is our stall speed in the landing configuration. Meaning with flaps, because I have the white arc there, with flaps, that is the slowest I can go according to my airspeed indicator before the aircraft would stall. So when we get into things like slow flight in the dirty or landing configuration, you're shooting for VSO, the end of that white arc. We'll talk about that more in a second here. Let's look at some more now. How about that green arc now? See, I just drew the arrow there under green arc all the way back around till it meets that yellow arc at, geez, about 175 knots. What are those two right there? Well, our green arc also tells us two V speeds. It tells us VS1, or sometimes referred to as VSI, one and the same. You'll hear it used both ways. It's technically called VS1, but you will hear it called VSI as a slang type term. That is our stall speed in the clean configuration. That's the end of our green arc, or the beginning, depending on how you're looking at it. You can see it there. The slower limit is VS1. The higher limit is our VNO. VNO is what some people call our normal operating range. NO, normal operating range. It's really called our maximum structural cruising speed. Meaning, do not exceed this speed unless you're in smooth air. That yellow arc, which we'll talk about here in a second, is for smooth air operations only. If it's a turbulent day and I'm getting bumped around, I want to stay inside of my green arc because it's my normal operating range, my VNO. Now let's go back to that stall speed for a second. VS1, again, sometimes called VSI, our stall speed in the clean configuration. Picture slow flight with no flaps. Now it's a clean configuration. And here's how I was taught to remember it. Here's how that slang VSI sometimes happens. We remember VSO. SO means stuff out. My flaps are out. Whereas VSI, or VS1, okay, means my stuff is in, keeping everything in and up. My gear would be up, my flaps would be up. Stuff out, stuff in. Follow what I'm saying there? That's how I remember which one's clean, which one's dirty. All right? So VSI, VSO. VSO, stuff out. All right? Let's continue looking at this now. How about where that yellow and that red arc meet? A lot of times it's more so just a red line there. That's what's called our VNE. Remember, the NE means never exceed. We never want to make it to that red arc. The green arc's where I want to be if it's bumpy. The yellow arc, I'm allowed to be there as long as it's smooth and there are no bumps. And the red arc, or the red line in most aircraft, is my never exceed speed. After that, you become a test pilot in that case. VNE. Now, a popular written test prep question is, which airspeed, which V speed, is not shown on the airspeed indicator? Well, that answer is VA. VA is your maneuvering speed, and your maneuvering speed changes with weight. Your maneuvering speed is the speed you want to be at when you go into your steep turns, your slow flight, and we're going to talk about that as we work into the flight maneuvers lesson. Your maneuvering speed is not pictured on your airspeed indicator because it changes with weight. No matter how heavy or how light the aircraft is, that maneuvering speed actually changes. Now, let's talk for a second. How does the airspeed indicator actually work? Well, the airspeed indicator is part of what's called our pitot-static system. Specifically, it uses the pitot tube. Now, if you've been out to the aircraft, done a discovery flight, you've seen this pitot tube. You've done a pre-flight inspection on this pitot tube. It's real simple technology. Air goes in the pitot tube, it's calibrated, and it gives you an airspeed reading. You could blow into the pitot tube and it would give you a reading. That's why when you're pre-flight, it's important to check and inspect that there's no bugs, debris, water, anything like that inside the pitot tube. Literally, air goes in through a tubing, gets calibrated, and gives you an airspeed indication via our pitot tube, which is one part of our pitot-static system that we're going to learn the other instruments that make that up in the further lessons.